Hey, bud.
Good evening.
Good evening to you as
How are
well.
you?
I'm doing exceptionally well today. How about yourself?
Good, thank you.
This ambient music got much more appropriate for this live stream. I didn't
Yeah,
think that
it's not. At least it's not that elevator music
it's
anymore.
not the dolphins either. I came across that one. I went to go live and they started just randomly making
Oh, stop
dolphin
it!
noises. I was like, what?
Stop mucking about.
Well, guys, if you're just now joining, and thank you so much for joining another episode of Unfiltered Historian Presents. Today is a topic that, quite frankly, is one of those ones that is Civil War obscura, if you will. We don't talk about this a lot. It gets brought up in passing in some of those, overall generalized Civil War books, and some recent publications have been out that are tremendous, by the way. But again, it is one of those campaigns of the forgotten fall, if you will.
It is
So,
forgotten. Yeah, that's right. And
very
it's
much
called the
so.
Forgotten Bristow Campaign.
Hey Darren, what did you say earlier? We were getting ready for this stream here, and Darren brought up something really interesting. He was like something about Gettysburg, and people think that after Gettysburg, the armies
Yeah,
just
that's
sat
right.
there.
So
So what did they
people
do?
just seem to think, don't they, that after Gettysburg, Meade doesn't do anything,
Right.
and Robert E. Lee just gets on his horse, and that whole army of Northern Virginia just walks back into Virginia, and just nothing happens. But you've actually got a lot of stuff going on between the 9th of October and the 26th of November,
You do,
um,
and
where
it's
you
a
see a
lot,
lot of things happening in this particular area, and particularly Culpeper, Virginia,
particularly
which it
Culpeper.
seems to have a lot of action going on. And one of the reasons is it's a big concentration of fords and important fords that you need to be able to get into certain areas of Virginia. And of course, we know Robert E. Lee likes the Chancellorsville and Fredericksburg area to sort of settle. So the one place he's going to go straight after Gettysburg is that area again, isn't it?
He is. So after Gettysburg, like Darren has just said, the armies are going to have a series of campaigns. They're going to fight in the Virginia territory, the state of Virginia, if you will. And the fights that take place, one of them is, damn, a victory for Meade. We're talking about Bristow Station. Bristow Station was technically a Union victory, as is the battle we're talking about today. So this kind of jumps us into Rappahannock Station. Is Rappahannock Station kind of a continuation of Meade wanting to show victories in the South and follow up with his excellent victory at Gettysburg? That's exactly what we're going to kind of examine and look at tonight. Now, again, when we do these talks in these videos, I don't want you guys to think this is going to be some groundbreaking video about the history. We're really focusing today on primary sources. That's what Unfiltered really likes, is to bring you what they have to say about it. Of course, we'll help you kind of paint the picture to the battle. I actually have some photos that I have taken on what would be considered the Rappahannock Station battlefield lately. These were as recent as the spring, summer. I went on a trip with my friend Joe LaFleur, where we spent hours out there trying to kind of piece together the battlefield and what was left of it, because unfortunately it does sit in the back of a sprawling urban neighborhood. So we've lost a lot of that to some of the housing there. Tim and myself have visited recently. So that was on our way back from Gettysburg, and we filmed, or not Gettysburg, excuse me. We did a Manassas day trip out there. And on the way back from Manassas, we decided that we were going to stop into Rappahannock Station and see how it was faring. And it was faring quite well. Thank you. I always enjoy getting out there. So just to get the pictures out of the way, I'm going to show you guys this one
Well,
here.
thanks to the American Battlefield Trust, sorry to jump in there, but they
No, you're
have
good.
preserved a lot of the ground. So thanks to them.
No, absolutely. And here we go. This is a shot I took at Rappahannock Station. Joe and I hopped out of the car and had to get our Civil War Trail sign. So that's kind of my plug today for Civil War Trails, the largest open air museum in the world. It's great. If you ever see some of these Civil War Trail signs, I always stop to look at them because they are just incredible and you can learn a thing or two from these. And they're always put in great locations. So if you are planning a trip to Rappahannock Station, do not worry. There is a Civil War Trails marker for you to see there.
Awesome.
This the park itself is a little different, and I'll show you that by illustrating me standing next to the Rappahannock Station sign that unfortunately fell over. So the story behind that, Joe and I tried to find it. We had some severe trouble trying to find the thing, and all of a sudden we come up to this
Hmm.
wooden form thing here. That's what you're looking at, little wooden structure there. And this was laying face down. I was like, what's this big sign? It's probably a big no trespassing sign. We opened it and turned it, and there it is. Future site of the Rappahannock Station Park. So, of course,
And now the local police are now looking for a skinny bloke with a goatee for damaging the sign.
right, I'm the one who damaged it. I've
If you
discovered
know
the
any
reason.
information, please call this number.
Don't nobody give him the number, please, because Darren's gonna call it. I don't need that.
Yeah.
But we did find that, and I wanted to pick it up and just place it back there so that the sign was visible for people to see. Because it for us, we had to go through the neighborhood. We had to go through a right of way access that was for the fire department actually, and it led us to this. I'm still just amazed by the view of the field that is left. It's an incredibly gorgeous view. The clouds. This is an unedited picture too, which I love. This is the way the clouds look. This is as my eyes would have seen it. Obviously, my eyesight's a little worse, so probably not this clear. But yeah, this was an incredible sight to see. For me, I'm a huge Emory Upton guy, and I'm sure a lot of you already know that are tuning in here. So being able to see that, it was amazing. Derek Rupert over on YouTube, thank you so much for coming in. He said he has been to Brandy Station and Kelly's Ford. Is this a separate place? It is indeed a separate place. So I know you're somewhat local, Derek. If you would have any interest in possibly going to see Rappahannock Station with me soon, we can definitely make that happen. Darren will be here very, very, very,
Derek,
very
when I'm
soon.
there, mate, come up and we'll go out to it.
Yeah, we could take some maps with
We'll
us.
do
We
it
could take
together.
some good stuff that you learned
Yeah.
from us today, and we can go and actually see some of the fields where this happens.
Now, what I will point out
Mm-hmm.
is, Derek, like I was saying at the beginning of the chat, is that this is all concentrated in the same area of Culpeper.
Correct.
Um, You've got Brandy Station, and again, you've got all the fords. You've got Kelly's Forge, you've got Raccoon Forge, you've got Germana Ford, sorry, and all these fords are important as far as the Wilderness Campaign, and of course Chancellorsville eventually as well, and of course Brandy Station, and all of these little events that happen between October 9th and November 26th. And
Mm-hmm.
I'll just say, we have you've got the Battle of Auburn, which is the 13th and 14th of October. And then on the 14th, you've got Bristol Station. You've then got Kelly's Ford and Rappahannock Station on the same day, the 7th of November. And then you've got the Mine Run campaign also,
Right.
which is
And
quite
Tim on
important little
Facebook
campaign
says
on its
it
own.
is a little offensive on Lee's part.
So all in that concentrated little area.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Lots of stuff there.
So Tim, thank you for joining, and thank you for joining me at Rappahannock Station when we went. That was awesome. I don't know why the Facebook page isn't letting me post to this. So if you're commenting on Facebook, comment through the unfiltered video. For some reason, my personal page just
Could
comments.
you send Tim a link so he could come and join us, because he's quite knowledgeable about this.
Well, if Tim is free, he's more than welcome to. Yeah, absolutely.
Come on, Tim.
Tell him just to shoot me a message. Anybody too. If you have anything you want to add to this conversation tonight, I can always put a live link up. We're always open to doing so. We did that with the Antietam program where we had a bunch of folks come in. Richard from Seattle Civil War Legacy came in. Dan came in for a little bit. It was great, and I really
It was
enjoyed it.
cool,
So
yeah, to get
I
other
would like to
people's opinions.
put that platform back up and offer that again. So again, but if you are watching from a different platform, we are on the Unfiltered Historian page. That comment section, for some reason, works a hell of a lot better than the one over here on my personal page. So, yeah, if you do see this and you're on the Unfiltered page, commenting there will allow me to see your comments much easier. But I am scrolling back to the personal one to check and see if anybody has any comments to add to this episode today. So, sorry to cut you off there, but I just want to make sure our Facebook friends get their comments read and heard as well. One of the last pictures I want to post with the Rappahannock Station is the bridge, which is there. This bridge is the modern railroad bridge. Now, in this picture that I mentioned or posted earlier, it may be hard to see on stream. I can see it quite well. But if you look in the left mid center of the picture, moving over to the left, you can see the little bit of river that's there. And you might be able to make out the bridge. There is a different trestle on this one, though. This is a green colored bridge. That is actually one of the roads that are going to go over that today. So that's not the railroad bridge. In fact, I do believe I have a picture of the railroad here somewhere. Joe and I did get to take some really cool photos of the railroad itself. This isn't the original railroad. This is a modern day view of the railroad. the modern day bridge. There was at one point a railroad that was destroyed by Confederates, and I believe that was in the 1862 battle. So yes, there was an 1862 battle of Rappahannock Station. This is the railroad bridge here from an up close view of it, and the muddy Rappahannock just lying underneath of it. And this is one of the destroyed pylons of the original train bridge that would have crossed over the Rappahannock that we will talk about today because this is very, very important to the campaign itself. Well, what brings us to Rappahannock Station in 1863? Robert E. Lee is deciding to take a line and put that on the Rappahannock. We call it very simply the Rappahannock River Line. Again, we discussed Meade having a victory at a place known. Oh, and John Kojak, welcome. Good to have you on a different account. It's weird not seeing Kojak pop
Yeah,
up
what's
here.
going on, John?
Everybody's on YouTube tonight. I'm okay with that. YouTube's getting some love finally. I don't
Hopefully,
normally
you're
get
not going
love
to
on
mention
YouTube.
Yorktown tonight, otherwise, I might have to leave. I think it was you, Kojak, wasn't it?
Yeah, it is. Kojak, welcome. Thank you,
Yeah,
John, for
because
joining
I'll
with
get the
us.
ump again. I'm only
But
joking.
Lee's going to move his line and place it on the Rappahannock River. Now, the Rappahannock River line that he's going to place it on, so we did see earlier a comment about Kelly's Ford. Kelly's Ford is instrumental to today's talk because it's instrumental to the battle. French is going to move troops around Kelly's Ford, and we'll get to talking about why Lee thinks that Kelly's Ford is the main objective, and he doesn't necessarily put as much attention on Rappahannock Station as he does Kelly's Ford. So he's directing all this attention at Kelly's Ford and thinking that this attack that's happening at Rappahannock Station is a feint. In reality, Rappahannock Station ends up being a very, very successful day for the United States soldiers that are going to take part in that. I got my buddy Upton to talk about a little bit, but I really want to highlight somebody else today that most don't get to talk about because Upton somewhat overshadows this and for the wrong reasons too. That's Brigadier General David Russell. Tablet on YouTube, TV is on the Packers. I forgot there was sports ball today. That makes sense. And touching a little bit on the terrain around there, as you guys have probably seen from some of the pictures there, I have a good quote when we have a lot of primary source today. This is going to be coming out of the 96th Pennsylvania Volunteer Regimental History by David Ward, forward by Edwin Colbaris, if anyone may have heard of him before. I don't know if you have. If you have, good on you. This quote comes actually from Oliver Wendell Holmes Jr., and he's describing what Rappahannock Station looks like. He says, the Rappahannock Station is a vile place to approach for attack. A plain, long and wide, with a small hill only for a mile or more, till you come to the riverbank, which is quite high. Naturally, a strong position made more so by two redoubts, with rifle pits extending a great distance above and below. So Kelly's Ford gets mentioned as it should because this line actually goes to Kelly's Ford. Hill and Ewell are the two Confederates we're going to really focus on who has their troops placed along this line here. Now, we mentioned earlier, too, there was an early battle, and I'm going to have Darren quickly highlight that in a second, but I want to just touch before he gets into that. The reason that I bring that up is because there are fortifications that are actually going to be, it's about a pair of two forts that are going to be in place there, and they're put up earlier in the war to prevent an enemy incursion from coming across the river. Well, the Union engineers capture in early 18, well, I shouldn't say early, but September of 1863, the Union engineers modified those works in order to repulse any effort by Lee to get across. Lee's engineers are going to mess with them again and reorient them so that these works can now be in a place to repulse the Union troops that are going to be coming across at that location. The railroad bridge is blown up earlier in 1862. So the railroad bridge that is there during this battle in 1863 in November is not a functioning railroad at the time. And Meade already kind of has his reservations about the Alexandria Railroad. It's not efficient enough to gain knowledge only. It's not really the best supply. And we learned that from Herman Haupt in Fredericksburg, even when they're talking about initially trying to strike down the Orange and Alexandria Railroad. That was something Lincoln formulated in his head, and Halleck stuck to that, of course. And when the generals meet early before Fredericksburg, that is ruled out because it's a one track line. It is not like some of the other railroads where you can really utilize that. The train cars for that were few and far between, if you could even get some. It was just not a good and viable means to really launch a campaign. So I think that's really factored into this as well. But obviously, we do see Meade really focusing on the O&A, and we can talk on that as the story kind of wraps up today. But there's an early battle, Darren, and you were reading up a little bit about that for us earlier. Do you want to talk kind of about that?
Yeah, okay. So in early August, Confederate General Robert E. Lee determined that obviously McClellan's army was going to withdraw from the Peninsula Campaign to reinforce John Pope. He sent General Longstreet's wing from Richmond to join Thomas Jackson, his wing near Gordonsville, and arrived to take command himself on August 15th. Pope withdrew to the line of the Rappahannock River. So there was a skirmish that takes place there. And long story short, James Longstreet just sweeps them away from that area, basically. And of course, that's then going to push them up to where they're going to meet eventually, aren't they? Going to have the battle of the Second Battle of Bull Run. So yeah, that's about it really. There's not really, it's not really much. It's more of a skirmish than anything really.
It is, and
But I will bring up one thing actually.
sure.
Sorry,
No, no,
sorry.
no. Go ahead.
Yeah. So in 1989, a archaeology. Sorry, I can't get that word out. Our archaeology team uncovered the remains of a Confederate soldier whilst excavating the ruins of St. James Episcopal Church to access a site of eligibility for National Register of Historic Places. The team identified the soldier of a native of New Orleans. So that's pretty cool.
Absolutely. And so, him being New Orleans, Louisiana takes a part in this battle on
Yes.
November 7th. So, the likelihood of that soldier being a casualty of this battle is pretty strong in my mind. I'm not going to go ahead and definitively say that, but there is a strong possibility.
I'll just have a little bit more background to the 7th, if you wouldn't mind.
I would love.
Um, so, a single pontoon bridge at the town of the Rappahannock Station was the only connection Lee retained with the northern bank of the river. The
Mhm.
bridge was protected by a bridgehead on the north bank, consisting of two redoubts and connecting trenches. Confederate batteries posted on the hill south of the river gave additional strength to the position. So that's his only position. I mean, that's the only that's a very strong position for Lee. So that's why he wants it.
And I can tell you from being there that of course, we have some factors that take place into the Rappahannock that are a little different today than there was in '63. But alluding back to our picture here, I'll kind of just give you an idea of the Rappahannock. It was very muddy the day Joe and I went, and that was due to some very heavy rain that took place. But you can kind of see in the video or the picture here, even some of the rapids that are just underneath it. So the Rappahannock is wide here, not as wide as going down to places like Tappahannock and some other places like that. But when you're in that area and you're able to sort of see how the river flows, the Rappahannock River itself is very, very, very rapid. I guess is the word I like to say, just a rapid river, and that creates a barrier for these troops. Another problem with this position Lee's holding is that a dam upriver actually raised the level of the Rappahannock, which is now deep and unfordable. That's a problem. Um, the Orange and Alexandria Bridge was destroyed by Yankees who abandoned the area in October. So I take that back. In October, that this bridge was actually in functionality at the time, but the Yanks will destroy that. And the loss of the bridge kind of threw Lee for a loop, and he's going to throw that pontoon bridge, which was about 800 yards north of the destroyed railroad bridge. But it, again, like Darren pointed out, it offered limited access to and from the northern bank, and moving large numbers of troops in either of the directions just
So
wasn't
it made it
possible.
easier for him to move in between, basically.
It did, but the
Um,
the large troops moving large amounts were what he wasn't able to do. So he didn't have a large line on the north bank. On the morning of the 7th, he actually has on the north bank, respectively, the 7th Louisiana, the 8th Louisiana. Behind and to the right of the 8th LA is the
and they
ninth
the
LA.
Louisiana Tigers. Am I correct in saying that?
Kansas Louisianians, absolutely. And the
Hmm.
6th LA will hold the far right, just straddling the destroyed railroad bridge. So all of these troops obviously had to utilize the pontoon bridge that Lee's throwing up. Again, that's about 800 yards north of the destroyed part of the Orange and Alexandria Railroad Bridge. And two forts that we mentioned earlier that were reoriented three times. Lee reorients them to their original position north of the Rappahannock. Those are there to try and repulse Union troops from coming across. And the forts that are in place will have batteries in them as well. So Confederates do manage to bring some cannon across and will try and fortify it in that way. And it, as we'll find out, doesn't necessarily go too well. The two forts are pretty much the heart of the earthworks that surround this position here. Um, any troops stationed above the Rappahannock at the fort had their backs to the river. So, what does that say for reinforcements? We've described the situation of the river. We know that the dam has caused the Rappahannock to raise quite a bit. So, it's deep, it's not fordable. You're now placing your troops in a position to where they're in combat. And with that being said, if you have to reinforce your army, it's not going to be an easy task to do. Um, the smaller of these earthworks, 100 feet from the railroad, the larger forts, 400 feet west of the railroad, and a mile long infantry trench on a low ridge would actually bring these two forts together to where they are now connected. So I like to allude to Rappahannock Station again being one of those preludes to the World War One. You almost got like a communication trench going on if you think about it. There's access to either side of the trench with the infantry, and it's all connected by these two large forts. Like my little Nixon thing there. I don't know why I just did that, but hey, sometimes you just got to throw it back to Richard Nixon, right?
Again,
Well,
this is the
oh
point
yeah,
when when they realise that full frontal attacks don't work.
no, yeah. So
You
digging
know,
in is definitely on the repertoire for these troops. So we know that the enemy could use the railroad embankment for cover. So now we're making these trenches a little vulnerable. And in fact, the trench runs directly into a creek that's a tributary of the Rappahannock River. Um, the enemy could use that railroad bank and launch an attack against the smaller fort over there closest to the railroad bridge. And the ground behind the fort is actually going to drop pretty steep into the river. The largest of the fort has a gentle slope. Two starkly different terrain features here. So one fort is easier to defend than the other, and one fort is easier to attack than the other. You know, you have that kind of situation going on. Lee's engineers didn't do much to improve the defense features of the fort. The failure to construct a ditch, which is noted, in front of the Confederate line would have hampered a Federal advance. And they also failed to erect abattis. So firepower was the reliant aspect of these forts. Lee had to rely solely on Confederate firepower to repulse any Union attack that was going to possibly take him out of position. With that, we do know that the Louisianians of Lee's Tigers are that's what we call the Louisianians. They are the ones occupying these forts. And on the 7th, the Louisiana Tigers actually go pretty far forward when the Union Army starts to arrive. These men are from the deep South again. They're from Louisiana. Uh, the men had replaced James Walker's Stonewall Brigade the day before. So if this attack would have came on the 6th, we would not be fighting against the Louisiana troops. We would be seeing the 6th Corps under John Sedgwick and the 2nd Brigades and just some of the other forces we'll talk about here in a minute going up against the Stonewall Brigade. Two pieces of Louisiana artillery guard under Lieutenant Robert Moore were unlimbered in each fort. Four guns, two guns in each fort. Dance's battery is going to stand behind the Rappahannock, guarding and overlooking the forts. His battery isn't close. It's not far, but it's not within reach of these forts. Well, artillery reach, yes, but not enough to really hamper any type of success Lee could have. And we know that Graham's battery is a little farther back, with the 5th Louisiana having skirmishers set up along the banks of the Rappahannock farther downstream. Rappahannock Station was defensible to the Confederates. That was a question that was pondered by Richard Ewell and General Lee, and they realized the vulnerabilities, and the works were just not as great as he intended. Not everyone believed this. Jubal Early and Edward Johnson were charged with shuttling infantry brigades across the river. The works to the north side of the river were inadequate, according to Jubal Early. He also added that the works provided no obstacle in themselves to an attacking enemy, and only furnished a temporary protection to our troops. We have Confederate cavalry scouts reporting Yankee infantry approaching Rappahannock Station on the 7th at around 11 o'clock a.m. The troops that are spotted belong to the 1st Division of the 6th Corps. The division, normally under Brigadier General Horatio Wright, was actually commanded by Brigadier General David Russell. The change was due to John Sedgwick's elevation from 6th Corps commander to wing commander, which in turn bumped Wright to corps over 1st Division, leaving the former unit under Peter Ellmaker of the 119th Pennsylvania. And my favorite, Colonel Emory Upton led Brigadier General Joseph Bartlett's brigade, because that officer is now leading the 1st Division of the 5th Corps. The remainder of the 6th Corps was also deployed and ready for action. Brigadier General Albion Howe's division deploys to the right of Russell, and we have Henry Terry's division behind Howe, acting in more in reserve. On the other side of the line, Penn's going to continue to watch enemy at the front, and a dispatch from Penn at about 1:15 p.m. told of enemy skirmishers advancing on the east side of the railroad. It was clear Penn's Louisiana Brigade was too small for the length of the works, and the adequacy of the works kind of set early into a mood, as he knew this was not going to be a successful day for his Louisianians or his Confederates in general. So the Union Army is going to start, the Union Army being specifically the 6th Corps, moving towards these positions now. The trenches, the infantry trench we mentioned earlier, that's going to be to the left of the farthest fort, will make up respectively again the 57th North Carolina to their left, the 6th North Carolina to their left, the 54th North Carolina, the 5th Louisiana dispatches their entire regiment out of skirmish position and will link with the 7th Louisianians at the far left of the battlefield, meaning that in between Hayes's line are Godwin's North Carolinians. Hayes is going to take 2 regiments and have them to the far left, while the rest of his regiments guard the right with the forts. And in the middle of all those, again, we have the 54th North Carolina, the 6th North Carolina, and the 57th. The 6th Maine deploys skirmishers in their front and will start to test the 2 forts. The Confederates didn't know that the odds were stacked against them, and 900 men were holding the line of ill-designed entrenchments to face about 30,000 men belonging to the 5th and 6th Corps. And as Hayes organizes his front, the North Carolinians of Robert Hoke's brigade completed a 7-mile march at the Double Quick and crossed the river on the pontoon bridge, and they reinforced the position there at about 4:30 p.m. An infantry attack was obviously needed to dislodge the Confederates. It's going to be done by Peter Ellmaker's brigade. They are just west of the railroad, and Upton's brigade is going to follow on Ellmaker's right. Ellmaker deploys from left to right, the 6th Maine, 5th Wisconsin, 49th Pennsylvania, the 119th Pennsylvania. The rest of the 6th Maine was on a skirmish line. Upton's men deploys with the 5th Maine on the right and the 121st New York on the left. When he spotted Hoke's North Carolinians reinforcing the Louisianians, Horatio Wright ordered the remainder of the 6th Corps forward. The advanced units are only 250 yards away from the fort at this point. The funny part about, well, I shouldn't say the funny, but the ironic part is, as we are going through tonight at 6:30, this attack is well underway. There is a night assault that will take place, and again, we'll get to that. But it's cool to think that as we're doing this talk right now, and you're conversing with you guys, this is happening 100 58 years ago. Yeah, 158 years ago today.
Can I just jump in there with a few
Please
little
do. Let
bits?
me
I
gather
mean,
a
I'm
spot to
going to
start
step
over.
back a little bit
No, no, no,
because
no.
um, yeah, I've lost my place now. Sorry.
I'm sorry.
The actual like we were saying at the beginning, there's actually two attacks at the same time. So the idea is Kelly's Ford is going to be attacked, and William H. French's forces cross at Kelly's Ford, 5 miles downstream from Early's position. Um, and then French obviously, and then once French had engaged, John Sedgwick's Sixth Corps advanced across the bridge, was to advance on the bridgehead at Rappahannock Station. But this was a rare miscalculation by Lee. Um, so after driving early skirmishers off, Sedgwick posted artillery on high ground to the north of Rappahannock Station and shelled the Confederate bridgehead. Meanwhile, the entire Union Third Corps had advanced across the Rappahannock River at Kelly's Ford. With darkness approaching, Lee was convinced that Sedgwick's advance was only a feint and that French's attack was the main one. So he's diverted his attention to Kelly's Ford when actually what's right in front of him is the main attack.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then, of course, that's what causes the problem.
Right.
So
And
very rare for Lee to get it wrong.
yeah, it is. This
Apart
is
from
one of those
Gettysburg,
days.
obviously, the biggest mistake ever.
I think that Tim kind of hit the nail on the head earlier when he said this is a little offensive for Lee. We're not talking about an offensive militarily. It's a little. It hurts Lee's pride to have a day like today happen
Yeah, he
against your
doesn't like
army.
being on the defensive, does he?
No, he
He
does
likes
not.
to be the man that's attacking. He doesn't like to have his pants pulled down and surprised, you know?
That's what happens here at Rappahannock Station. That's for sure. Well, the odds are always again. We talk about them being in the favor of the Union, and they are.
But the
And
Union never move. They never move anywhere. They never do anything between
what they do
Gettysburg
today?
and the
Wait,
wilderness, you
wait till
know?
you hear what Russell does. This is awesome. So General Russell is trying to figure out a way to not repeat some of these frontal assaults. And the way he's going to go about this is he's going to create sort of a ruse. Okay, we have mentioned that the Sixth Maine deploys as a skirmish line, and Russell wants to connect more troops that he's going to deploy in. So he's going to send a force forward, link up with the skirmishers. So this is going to trick the Confederates into thinking that there is a line coming to this skirmish line to reinforce it, when in theory, all that's happening is he's reinforcing a long line to send it straight into the forts and attack. And that's exactly what takes place. The 6th Maine forward and follows this line. He orders the 5th Wisconsin to move up to support the reinforced skirmish line. And as soon as they arrived, the 6th Maine was ordered to rise up and attack the rebel works. They
And
fixed
can I just
bayonets.
point out there's
Yep.
only 2,000 men that are actually at Rappahannock Station defending this bridgehead. So
Yeah.
you've got the whole of the Union Army of the Potomac coming in that direction, and you've got 2,000 men defending it.
All right. And the
You got
6th
no
Maine,
chance.
those
And
guys,
this, yeah, 6 main heavy casualties.
they do. They're some of the Union forces that take some pretty heavy losses. They're the first line forward, and they're at double quick, and they're hit by such a sustained fire that the regiment does go back, and the fire will grow heavier along the lines. And the men are just struck down nonstop. Major Fuller says the fire grew heavier as the line neared the works, and the men were struck down with fearful rapidity. But unwavering with wild cheers, the survivors reached the fortifications and, springing over them, engaged the enemy in a hand to hand combat. This sudden attack could not hold as the darkness started approaching, and a sustained artillery barrage from the Union side. Now, the Union's introducing some heavy guns there. Will cause some of those Louisianians, the 8th LA, 9th LA, and 6th LA, to flee the fort. The Union have now breached the fort. The Federal artillery fire convinced the rebels to keep their heads down, so the large segments of the line couldn't even see enemy soldiers dashing forward until they were nearly at the works themselves. A wind is going to be blowing today, a very strong wind, and that, I think, plays a part into the deafening sounds. There's no real sound of the Union Army approaching these forts. A Louisiana officer will claim that his men fired vigorously, but with coolness and deliberation. So, meaning they must have maintained a very professional attitude while they're shooting at their counterparts there. The left of the Federal line entered the small redoubt with the right wing and hit the larger redoubt and the rifle pits that connected the two forts. The attackers, who are engaging the entire Ninth Louisiana and the right of the 8th and the left side of the 6th, stunned those defenders, who managed to regroup, and with the help of the rest of the 8th Louisiana and 6th LA, they counterattack. Major Fuller recalled that the rebel reinforcements commenced a raking fire down the length of our line, which proved very destructive, and perceiving the weakness of our force, advanced heavily upon our right. So the main troops lose the works. They capture them momentarily. The Louisianians come in and they pour a galling counterattack. The fire comes in and just rakes those men in that fort, and they have to flee to get out of that position. Well, here comes the 5th Wisconsin moving in. They're sprinting as fast as their legs could possibly move. And these new arrivals hit the larger redoubt and the rifle pits farther to the right. And the 6th Maine, forced from the right side of the works, wheeled back and attacked the small fort. Remember, the small fort is farther to the left of the railroad bridge, the larger fort to the right. Early has no idea what is happening at this point. And again, I mentioned earlier that this attack, and due to the sustained Union artillery here at this fort, tricks Lee into thinking that the larger movement, the larger attack, is going to be at a place known as Kelly's Ford. So Lee's not directing all his attention to this field at Rappahannock Station. John Pegram and John Gordon are told to bring up their brigades, but by this time, Hayes's men were streaming across the pontoon bridge trying to get out of Dodge. The Confederate line becomes pierced around 5:15 to 6:30 p.m. So now we're in the vicinity of it again, getting dark. It's November, as most of you in America and across the pond there, we just hit daylight savings. It's 6:40. It's pitch black outside. Okay, so this kind of plays into the I don't know for sure that they were observing the time change back then, but I do know that, I mean, if it's getting dark around this time now, we're looking at not the greatest sight. You can't move all these men in this darkness that's now encroaching the battlefield. Russell is watching all this fighting from an advanced position and realizes that the artillery barrage and infantry attack didn't drive the Confederates. It's time for him to act. The 49th and 119th Pennsylvania were the last two of Elmaker's brigades, with just 4 companies in the ranks. The 49th Pennsylvania was very undermanned. And I'm going to stop there with my narrative because I have with me some primary sources. Yay!
Yay! And just before you, I just want to emphasise how embarrassing this is for Jubal Early. So all told, Early's forces lose 1,600 men, nearly 4 times the number of Union casualties, and all 4 guns of Green's battery. So they lose a whole battery. So that's
all right. Thank you, Daryl. He did jump in for us there. They did not follow daylight savings back then. Very good.
Okay, cool. Thank you, Daryl.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
Good to see you again, Daryl.
Yeah, it is great to see you, Daryl. Early was, in my opinion, a pretty poor general. Echo that.
Yeah.
I'm not an Early fan by any means, especially after.
And why you're getting the accounts, I do have, and it's very, very vague. There's not a lot of detail in it. But if anyone's familiar with the book of All for the Union, Elijah Hunt Rhodes, so he wrote a little. He was at this battle, so he wrote a tiny little piece, and it's not very long and it's not very detailed, but he did write it. So just let me find the place, and I'll read it. When I can't bloody find it now. Look, I'm bloody useless.
You are not bloody useless.
Right, where is it? Oh, here we go. So yesterday morning, the 7th, we left our camp at Warrington and marched to the Rappahannock Station, arriving at 3 p.m. Skirmishers were deployed from the 1st Brigade of our division, and the fight began. It was hot for an hour, and shot and shell flew lively. The 2nd Division of our corps charged the rebel fort, captured it. 3 cannons, over 1,000 prisoners. Our brigade only lost 5 or 6. The scene was fine, for the fight took place just at sunset, and the fort was outlined against the sky. So there you go. That's Elijah Hunt Rhodes, everyone.
I have a fun story with Elijah Hunt Rhodes. Actually, it's completely not Rappahannock Station related, but my great great grandfather from Parker's Virginia Battery, who at the time of Elijah Hunt Rhodes writing about him, is with the Kemper Light Artillery. So anybody that knows Del Kemper knows exactly who I'm talking about. In fact, there is a famous story about a bridge being blocked at the First Battle of Manassas, and it's contributing to the marksmanship, so to speak, of my ancestor's shot. He's the one that pulls the lanyard on Del Kemper's gun, shoots a horse cart that ends up blocking the bridge and the route back on Cub Run, and is noted for it not only in the official records but also in Elijah Hunt Rhodes' diary. So that was like a huge moment for me to be like, wow, my great great granddad's getting recognition from Elijah Hunt Rhodes of all people, who I find incredible. So that's kind of a cool story. But our 49th Pennsylvanians, Robert Westbrook writes the regimental history, which is a superb account of the battle. And he's going to really detail what happens on their front. So later on, we'll see, especially at places like Spotsylvania, the 49th actually falling in with Upton's men and attacking the Dole salient location at Spotsylvania. But in this time, he's with Elmaker's men, and they're attacking kind of farther down on the lines around or in the middle of these two forts, if you will. So on Saturday, November 7th, we moved at daybreak. Soon companies B, C, and D were deployed to skirmish the front and flanks of the column and came in contact with rebel pickets near Rappahannock Station. We formed a line of battle, halted, and looked at the rebels a while. The 6th Maine Regiment relieved our 49th skirmishers, and we took our places in the regiment. A rebel officer rode towards our line, and several shots were exchanged, and he left as fast as he came. At about 2 p.m., we advanced, and our batteries on the right flank opened on the rebel works, which were on the north bank of the river. Now the 6th Maine skirmishers moved forward slowly. Our formation was the 5th Wisconsin on the left, 49th Pennsylvania Volunteers in the center, and the 119th Pennsylvania Volunteers on the right. We slowly advanced, and about 4 p.m., the skirmishers advanced and commenced firing. Driving the rebel skirmishers back to their works, we advanced slowly in line of battle under cover of a bluff of ground. At the at the foot of this bluff was a small stream. Some of our boys got a little wet in crossing it, but in less than 5 minutes, we were up on the almost level plain. The rebel works were about 500 yards in our front, and the 6th Maine skirmishers were now almost up to the works. But the rebels pushed them back a little. General Russell gave us orders to charge, and in less than 2 minutes, he gave us orders to not double quick, but to run. That they were driving the 6th Maine. We see them and obey his orders. Now the 6th Maine advances again. We did our best to assist them, but received plenty of grape and canister from the rebel batteries. We soon were up to their works and using our bayonets and butts of our guns. The rebels were very stubborn. The 6th Maine had a regular hand-to-hand conflict. It was getting dark, but we have their works. Some of the rebels tried to get away across the river on the pontoon bridge, but we had command of it, the river being not over 50 yards from us. Squads of them would start to run across the bridge, and we would give them a volley. Many of those who got hit fell into the river, which was very deep. We had everything under our control. Now the 5th Maine and the 121st New York regiments came in from the right and helped gather up the prisoners, and they get just as much credit from our generals as our brigade does. They deserve some credit, but Russell's brigade did the work, and the credit is due us. So, reader, place the credit where it belongs. Let the private, officer, regiment, or brigade. We have all their works, batteries and horses, pontoon bridges, 1,600 small arms, 7 stands of rebel colors, 1 flagstaff, and 1,800 prisoners. In the charge, the 119th Pennsylvania Volunteers, being on the right and anxious to get to the fort quick as possible, came in on the left oblique, lapping over about 2 companies of the 49th Pennsylvania Volunteers, which caused some little dissatisfaction in the brigade tonight. Recollect the 49th Pennsylvania Volunteers had but 4 companies. About this time, Colonel Henry B. Minichin, with the 18 men, was quickly sent down to our end of the pontoon bridge to keep the rebels from setting fire to the other end. Soon the colonel of the 49th New York Regiment was ordered to relieve him. The colonel asked where the officer in command was. "Here I am," answered Corporal Minichin. You, yes, sir, me, and the brigade or the bridge is safe, responded the colonel. The colonel then said, well, corporal, I will relieve you. He was very much surprised to know that a corporal had charge of such an important position. Our boys were running around over the battlefield, hunting up the dead and wounded. The following is a list of the killed and wounded of the 49th. Thomas Benjamin, George W. Wilson, George Harleman, and Richard McQuillan, all killed. I would go on. The list of wounded is quite extensive, so I'm not going to read that, but 4 killed from the 49th Pennsylvania Volunteers. The 49th Pennsylvania also, again, serves in Spotsylvania, does some incredible stuff throughout the war later on. But Robert Westbrook writes such good accounts in this. And if you haven't seen this book yet, Civil War and More, Jim Schmick helps with getting some great regimentals, and that's where I ended up getting this wonderful gem of a book. So if you want some good quotes about the war, again, the 49th Pennsylvania Volunteer Regiment has quite a few really, really, really good quotes that I find pretty interesting. The rest of the battle here that we're talking about, so now we just highlighted the 49th Pennsylvania. The 119th Pennsylvania is highlighted, but let's talk about Upton now, because this is where I like to talk
This
about it.
is this is you're a big Upton fanboy, aren't you, Tyler?
Right. So about 10 minutes ago, 158 years ago, Upton was going to launch his attack, 6:30 p.m. Isn't that pretty cool? Just get goosebumps thinking about it too. It's awesome. Upton,
Sorry, do you need a moment alone?
my brain's working, man. I get to give my boy some credit here, and I love it.
Oh,
For those that
sorry,
don't
right.
know, which is
Let's all turn off.
right. For those that don't know, Upton is someone I have studied quite extensively and continue to do so. In fact, next year I'm going to be speaking in a few roundtables about Upton and some of the stuff that I have gathered in my research, and I'm still working on that.
You never know, Tyler. One day you might even write a book.
Maybe one day. Who knows?
One day in the future. I look forward to that.
Maybe one day. Huh. Well, according to Upton, and again, according to Upton, Russell needs to be the one that's giving credit to this. So I'm going to throw everybody for a loop for a minute. As much as I love Upton and as much as I think he's innovative and does some great attacks, this isn't his idea. He's following orders. All this credit needs to go to Brigadier General David Russell, just as Robert Westbrook told us in the 49th Pennsylvania. If you've ever read Jeffrey William Hunt's Meade and Lee at Rappahannock Station, phenomenal book, by the way. He talks about that too and goes quite extensive into that, which I think is awesome. And I'm glad that this is getting more attention because, again, being an Upton guy, I want to say that he's got all this credit and he does these great things, but he's simply following orders. He's not creating something here. This is just orders being followed. But with that being said, according to Upton, General Russell's orders to advance with 2 regiments reached him after dark. So that's adding to the allure of this battle here that this is now a night assault that's about to take place. We don't have flashlights. We don't have walkie-talkies. This is all just hoopla. This is a huge jumbled mess that's about to happen. So he immediately complies because Upton does his diligence and listens to orders, whether he likes them or whether he doesn't like them. His orders are to hold the redoubts already captured by the 3rd Brigade. Trotting over to his front line, Upton orders 2 regiments, the 121st New York and the 5th Maine, to move forward. The 5th was on the right and the 121st on the left. And during the advance, Russell clarified his orders to Upton: dislodge the enemy from a rifle pit to our right of the redoubt, and from which the enemy, probably the 57th and 6th North Carolina, maintained an enfilading fire. Rebel artillery rounds will start exploding within Upton's rank, tossing men around like rag dolls. The advance halts behind a ridge about 150 yards from the trench of rifle pits, and the men did not have long to wait before Upton orders them to throw their knapsacks off and fix bayonets. After about 10 minutes, the men will move, where they were within 30 feet of the works. The officers ordered them to charge, yelling at the top of their lungs, and the Federal infantry moved quickly up and over the trenches. North Carolinians managed to fire 1 volley that had barely any effect on Upton's assaulting forces. Darkness, the screams of wounded and attacking men, and gunfire masked the fact that Upton only had 2 regiments, more than the regiments that were in front of him. The Yanks pour over the works and smother the 54th North Carolina. So sudden and unexpected was our movement upon them that the enemy seemed paralyzed, boasted Colonel Clark Edwards from the 5th Maine. The work was carried at that point of the bayonet without firing a shot. The enemy does try to fight and hold on to. Isaac Best of the 121st New York explains that there was little firing in the defenses because the attack was so sudden and had stunned the North Carolinians, and Upton's men came in with muskets used as clubs and bayonets ready to poke the enemy. Confederates, North Carolinians alike, surrender and start running towards the river, the ones that don't surrender. Because of Upton, his attack drove the North Carolinians and the 5th and 7th Louisianians far away from this Confederate line. Upton is going to order Colonel Edwards to gather up as many men from the 5th Maine as he could possibly muster up, and he yelled as loudly as possible so both his own men and Confederates could hear this. Upton yells, "When I give the command to charge, move forward. If they fire upon you, I will move 6 lines of battle over you and bayonet every one of them." With Albion Howe's Federal Division in front and to their left, and now elements of Russell's division moving to attack, many of the Louisianian troops still resisting, they threw down their arms. Our fellows got around them on the right, and the whole crowd surrendered, remembers Isaac Best. So to think about this is something I always say is the pattern of the Civil War. If you're familiar with the story of the fake tanks, the fake airplanes, and everything, Upton completely tricks the Confederates into thinking that he has more men than he actually has. And because of the suddenness of the assault, and because the way the assault was ordered, and because of it being night and the confusion setting in, those North Carolinians and Louisianians just drop their guns and they're like, "God, hell with this. We're not getting messed up here." John is hitting us with some trivia as a breather, thankfully. He says, trivia fact, William French and Thomas Jackson were openly hostile to each other when stationed together in Florida. Jackson was reprimanded twice. The second reprimand was issued by General Winfield Scott. See, John, this is awesome. Thank you for that bit of trivia tonight. I needed a breath anyways. Whew. Man, so
Anyway, I was just reading through Elijah Hunt Rhodes' diary, and he actually mentions it a little bit more, a bit further down. And he actually draws a cool little picture of the river and the fort and everything. And he just says, so the Sixth Corps capture 600 prisoners, 130 commissioned officers, 2 brigade commanders, 4 cannons. So there you go.
It's a hell of a spoil to capture.
That is. And also 8 flags. They also capture 8 flags. Yeah, so that's pretty cool. That's a cool little book, that.
It is. Elijah Hunt Rhodes gives us some of the greatest first source material we'll ever have. Before I get to dive into Upton's own letter, this is a fun one that many of you may not have seen before. This letter actually is one he's going to write to his sister just after the Rappahannock Station affair. And he actually himself highlights how instrumental Russell was and how soldierly he is. And I'm even going to include the foreword of this letter that was compiled by a very famous cavalry general, James Wilson. I used to not think was all that and have done some more research in. And I'm like, yeah, I'm a Wilson guy now. So if my buddy Cameron is watching, who I used to banter with about Wilson, I think he's the bee's knees. I'm not going to lie. I do have some newfound love for Mr. Wilson. But at the interest of just kind of finishing the narratives before I dive into the closing of this podcast today with some of the first source material and getting ready to start out our Fredericksburg series, which starts Tuesday, guys. So Tuesday at 7 p.m., we are going to be covering the Dahlgren Raid, and that is where my focus goes after tonight. I'm so excited to bring Fredericksburg back and talk about all this stuff. I'm just bouncing in my seat with excitement. But with the end of the Rappahannock Station battle, not every Louisiana soldier wants to surrender. So scores of North Carolinians and Louisianians are going to, heavily outnumbered, of course, move back towards the river and try to reform. And Colonel Godwin's going to assume control of this mass of men and start leading several charges in an effort to to break the enemy who is now growing inside of these trenches. Hundreds of Confederates already surrendered, but hundreds more are going to try and escape. The lucky ones reached the pontoon bridge, had to decide whether they swim across in the deep, cold water or run across a bridge that was swept by enemy artillery and small arms fire, which probably is coming from the 49th Pennsylvania, judging by what they are saying. They have control of the bridge. So these allusions here are referring to what was happening with the 49th Pennsylvania training their sights onto this bridge and the retreating Confederates that are coming across. Two exceptions were the commander. Many of these men, perished either from the lead or drowning. The most prominent escapee was Brigadier General Harry Hayes. The brutality of this fighting within the Confederate works matched anything witnessed to that point in the war, according to one Louisiana Tiger. Our men clubbed their muskets and used them freely over Yankee heads. This is one of the few instances where bayonets were widely utilized. A New Jersey officer walked over the field after the battle. Here, this unusual sight of death by bayonet wounds was witnessed. He probably didn't forget the sight of a dozen or more Confederate soldiers showing bayonet wounds, as well as some of the Union dead. The Rappahannock Station bridgehead for the Confederates has collapsed. Losses were heavy. Hayes lost 702 killed, wounded, and captured, while Hoke, under Godwin's command, those are Hoke's North Carolinians, lost 928 to all of those. 1630 is our casualty list for Rappahannock Station. When muster was called on November 10th, only 500 men answered the call, and Hayes's command was so decimated that there was talk of consolidating it with other Louisiana brigades within the Army of Northern Virginia, but that obviously, as we know, does not happen. The Union loses 327 men of Elmaker's men. Upton loses just 63. The entire Federal Army loses only 419 men that day. The 6th Maine, who obviously initiated this fight here, is going to take the heaviest of the casualties with 139 men. The 5th Wisconsin loses 59. What a battle this was. It doesn't seem like a lot comparatively when we talk about places like Gettysburg and Antietam and all this stuff and numbers. But for an action like this, and what we said there was 2,000 Confederates holding the forts and the
Hmm.
lines.
There's
You're
still a lot of people.
1,630 casualties, my friends. That
Yeah,
out of
yeah,
2,000? Holy crap! Like
yeah,
that's
yeah.
that's significant losses you're taking there. I'm not a mathematician by any means, so I can't necessarily go in here and definitively do a percentage, but that's got to be over 50% casualties. Way over. So that ends. I got some notes there out the way. Let's get into some of our primary sources before we close today. Darren, do you want to add anything while I'm gathering some of this stuff?
Yeah, so I shall just
Cool.
finish it off. So, following the battle, Lee established a new defensive position along the Rapidan River, and that will lead up to a little campaign called the Mine Run Campaign, which will run from the 27th of November to the 2nd of December. And then, of course, that will ultimately lead in the spring to Grant coming over and the Battle of the Wilderness.
That's right. So this one of the next primary sources I'm going to share with you comes from Emory Upton. I wanted to make sure I read this. This one's a little lengthy, not too bad, but I got to hear it from these guys themselves. I can ramble on all day about Rappahannock Station and Upton and different aspects of the war, but it's always good to hear what these guys have to say. So again, the first forward to this is done by cavalryman James Wilson, saying Upton, although now in command of a brigade, had not yet attained the actual rank of a brigadier general. He could not be blind to his own fitness for the desired promotion, and although he shows in his letters of this period a restiveness because of the delay, the only recognition which the government could bestow, he never failed to do his whole duty in whatever service he was called upon to perform. In the assault of the rebel entrenchments, or tete de pont, at Rappahannock Station, he led his 2nd Brigade of the 1st Division of the 6th Corps again to victory. In this action, his clear perception, ready courage, the rare skill with which he led his brigade, gained for it a brilliant victory over a much superior enemy, both in numbers and strength of position. His own story, told with the modesty of a hero and with a due appreciation of the great soldierly qualities of his immediate commander, General David A. Russell, is thus graphically related. My dear sister, doubtless you have seen through the papers that this brigade has been engaged with the enemy and that it met with astonishing success. There are many accounts of the battle extant, but I will give you the true version, believing it will interest you all. Our division left Warrenton at daylight on the 7th. General Bartlett being ordered to the 5th Corps, I fell in command of the brigade. We marched to the railroad near Rappahannock Station, halted there till dusk when the fight began. From 1 o'clock till sunset, there was considerable artillery firing and skirmishing, but no serious loss was inflicted on either side. At dusk, General Russell, who commanded the division, conceived the idea of capturing the enemy's works by a coup de main. To this end, he brought forward one regiment apparently to relieve the skirmishers who had been in front all day, and another to act as a support. The enemy saw the whole operation, but supposing it simply a relief, paid but little attention to the matter. The first or old line of skirmishers were notified of the intention. The second line came up to where the first lay, when both rushed upon the enemy's redoubts and were almost inside before the enemy recovered from his astonishment. This gallant attack was made by the 6th Maine, which suffered very heavily the 5th Wisconsin and two companies of the 121st New York. 4 guns, one color, and 200 prisoners were captured upon the spot. The bridge by which the enemy maintained communication with the south bank of the river was now commanded by our men who held the redoubts. Seeing his retreat thus intercepted, the enemy made desperate efforts to recapture the works and had well nigh succeeded when General Russell sent me an order to bring forward 2 of my regiments to his assistance. The 121st New York and the 5th Maine were in the first line. I immediately ordered them forward and to avoid any delay directed them to load while marching. This done, telling them we were wanted to help hold the works captured, they took the double quick and soon arrived to the support of our hard-pressed comrades. Upon arriving, General Russell pointed out a rifle pit from which the enemy maintained an enfilading fire, and he ordered me to charge the rifle pit and hold it. The work was on the summit of a gently rising knoll. Their banners could be plainly seen outstanding against the sky, while their saucy heads appearing everywhere above the parapets forewarned us how deadly might be our task. My orders were distinct. It remained to execute them in the safest, surest, and most satisfactory manner. Under cover of darkness, we formed within 100 yards of their works. I told the 5th Maine that the troops from Maine had won laurels on every field and that the gallant 5th must not be behind them. A few words of the 121st New York sufficed to rouse their determination to the highest pitch. I directed them to unsling knapsacks and fix bayonets. Then, giving the strictest orders not to fire, we advanced at quick time to within 30 yards of the rifle pit when the order to charge was given. The work was carried at the point of the bayonet. The enemy fought stubbornly over their colors, but were overpowered. To execute my orders, we had only to remain where we were, but a more brilliant success was in store. The celebrated Louisiana Brigade of Stonewall Jackson's old division lay behind the rifle pits to our right. On their banners were inscribed Cedar Run, Manassas, 2nd Winchester, Harper's Ferry, Sharpsburg, Fredericksburg, Chancellorsville, and Gettysburg. Word was brought with me that the enemy on our right was in confusion. He could also be seen apparently moving to his rear. Without waiting for further orders, I sent Captain Hall of the staff to report to General Russell that we had performed the task assigned to us and made immediate dispositions to attack. Major Mather of the 121st New York, with a portion of his regiment, was ordered to seize the bridge and to arrest those who might attempt to swim the river. Colonel Edwards of the 5th Maine, with a part of his own in the 121st Regiment, was ordered to charge at double quick and not to fire. The remainder of the 2 regiments was held in reserve should the enemy offer resistance. I told our men not to fire and stated in a loud tone that 4 lines of battle were supporting us. The enemy, being deceived, supposed a vastly superior force was advancing, and the entire brigade of the enemy laid down their arms. The colonel commanding surrendered personally to me. These movements resulted in capturing 7 colors, 103 commissioned officers, 1,337 enlisted men, and 1,225 stand of arms. It was all done after dark. When one could not distinguish friend from foe, and with a force numbering 568 officers and men included, our total loss in the two regiments amounted to 63 killed and wounded. I think the slight loss, in a great degree, may be attributed to our not firing. The enemy, hearing the orders given distinctly, concluded that it probably was not best to provoke us and therefore quietly surrendered. To General Russell, who is one of the best and bravest officers in our service, belongs the credit of this brilliant success. He displayed one of the finest traits of generalship in selecting the time and mode of attack. The position in the daytime could only have been carried at a loss of at least 1,500 men. As it was, our loss did not exceed 300, and with a total result of 4 cannon, 8 colors, 1,600 prisoners, and 1,600 stand of arms. It is believed that a great battle is soon to be fought. Our army is in excellent condition and will give a good account of itself. I love when Upton writes these letters to his family members because they make for better reading than the official records, not taking away from the importance of them. They're the driest things you'll ever read, and I'm sure you know that. But to hear him describing this similarly, but to his sister, he gives it more of a flair and pomp and circumstance that he's really kind of alluding to there. Another really cool thing I have to share with you guys today is a sketch done by that same assault. This is depicting Upton moving into the trenches there
Wow.
and his force. Yeah, it's a grim picture or grim painting to look at. In fact, you see a
Yeah, of
color
course.
barrel there
You
just
think
getting
people are
bayoneted.
bayoneting each other and clobbering each other.
He's getting shot and bayoneted. Wow, that longer I look at it, the more I notice in the
Yeah.
picture there.
Oh, but there's no bayonet wounds in the Civil War. They never used them.
We've heard multiple accounts tonight.
Oh no,
In
yeah.
fact, that reminds me. I
But
have one that so Dan Casala was initially going to join us tonight.
oh,
That
that's
life
correct. Yeah.
obviously gets in the way, and he sent me a New Jersey account that we actually went over. And so I did put a scrawl note in my notes from earlier that you may have heard that one quote, but he sends me the entire list, and I actually would like to pull it up for you. And I promised Dan I would read that today, guys. I'm going to check over there. On Facebook. Sorry for not being able to respond a lot on the one that is on the personal page, as those for some reason are not showing up on our video here on Restream. So I do see them. We're liking them. We're going through it and trying to make sure we keep up with that. But if you want to comment and have your comment seen on the page, the Unfiltered Historian Facebook page is where all that does work at. So I am pulling up my quote or our account here from Dan. Dan, thank you so much for sending this to me earlier. It is an awesome account, and I'm excited to share it. The forward movement began early in the morning of the 7th, and by noon the two corps had reached a point a mile and a half from the railroad bridge. Another column consisting of the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd Corps under General French had gone to Kelly's Ford, 4 miles below the Rappahannock Station bridge, to drive off the Confederate troops there and crossing to go up the south side of the river to help Sedgwick. The efforts of the latter to make an impression on the force in the rifle pits and earthworks on his front with artillery were without result, though 6 siege guns of a large caliber had been sent to him. It was not until late in the afternoon that, finding the gunfire to no avail, Sedgwick determined to carry the works by assault. The 2nd and 3rd Brigades of the 1st Division of the 6th Corps, under General David Russell, were ordered forward to charge the works. They moved forward steadily under a heavy fire and rushed the works, driving the enemy out and capturing the works. The assault was gallantly seconded by 2 regiments from the 5th Corps. The 2 brigades captured 1,200 prisoners, 8 battle flags, 4 guns, and a large number of small arms. The 1st Brigade, 1st Division, 6th Corps, the Jerseymen, was held in reserve and witnessed the fight, though taking but a slight part in it. Bullets and shells were plentiful enough, which did some damage in the brigade. When the Jerseymen marched to the works, they realized the obstinacy of the defense as evidenced in the destruction of the gun carriages, caissons, horses, and parts of the entrenchments. Here, the unusual sight of death caused by bayonet wounds was witnessed. A dozen or more Confederate soldiers showing bayonet wounds, as well as some Union dead. The Confederates being driven away from the crossing, the troops crossed over and they camped. I have one more primary source tonight, and then we can start having our closing comments here. This one came out of nowhere, actually. That I found. I was reading through, not out of nowhere, but reached my desk today. It's the Fighting with the 18th Massachusetts, the Civil War memoir of Thomas H. Mann. This is his diary here, his memoir, if you will. And he does write to us about Rappahannock Station. Reveille sounded at 4 o'clock on the morning of November 7th, and the whole corps was on the move at daylight. It passed Buellton Station, then followed the railroad to within 2 miles of Rappahannock Station, where a battle line was formed in the woods, muskets stacked, and the men remained at ease for nearly 3 hours. At 3 in the afternoon, the sharp call to attention jumped along the line from one regiment to another, and from brigade to brigade, the clattering of muskets as they were grabbed from the long lines of stacks produced a kind of music to which these veterans had become accustomed. But at this time, the sound seemed to impress everyone that something was in the wind. Officers were riding along the lines and conferring with each other in a mysterious kind of way that betokened anticipated obstacles ahead. The next order was prepare to load, load, and thousands of iron rammers sprang into the air in an act of sending the cartridges to their seat. Even while this military movement was being executed, a regiment was seen to leave the line and rapidly deploy out to the front as skirmishers. Then the right and left regiments of the brigade, the 22nd Massachusetts and the 118th Pennsylvania, moved to the front and deployed into a single line of battle, while the 18th Massachusetts and the 1st Michigan followed closely behind in columns of division. Thus, moving through the woods of 20 minutes, the whole body of troops debouched into the fields and received a well aimed salute from several rebel guns that were defending the Rappahannock a mile away. Two strong rebel earthworks had been encountered on either side of the river, both now in plain sight of this brigade, and playing into his ranks with shot and shell, protesting against a further advance, but the order was forward. And on the troops swept ahead, keeping their alignments as if on dress parade. The skirmishers in front began to engage with the like of outposts of the enemy, and steadily pushed them back toward the higher land that was occupied by frowning rebel earthworks. The first few shots sent the rebel guns plowed some bad gaps in the lines, but there were no wavering or a moment's halt. The command simply closed them up, touched the elbow where it had been lost, and moved straight on. Soon the skirmishers approached near enough to have rebel gunners to bother their accuracy of aim, and the advancing line was too near for effective shell work, but not near enough for canister. It was a superb exhibition of the discipline and steadiness of veteran troops, though it made few of the late recruits so deathly sick that they dropped from the ranks in a dead faint and as white as real corpses. All the courage of a Frederick the Great will not make a man face the music whose nerves serve him such a trick. Many of the shots aimed at this marching column fell short, rebounded, and passed 20 feet over the heads of the men. And it was a comical sight when 20 or 30 yards of heads were ducked as if expecting to dodge it. For the moment, that part of the line appeared as if crawling on all fours, yet neither the step nor the alignment were lost. One shell struck the ground 30 feet in front of the line occupied by the corporal and skipped well over the heads of all. But in gouging the ground, it threw a wheelbarrow load of dirt with such force as to send him, with comrades McGinnis and McCollum, sprawling to the ground before time was given to make even a motion to dodge. Not much injury was inflicted, and McGinnis remarked while brushing the dirt from his face, "Faith and be jabbers, the dumb rebels are trying to bury us before we are killed." Company I occupied the van of the regiment, and the shot that floored the corporal and his two comrades burst immediately in its rear, killing Sergeant Brown and Private Barry of Company E, besides severely wounding several others of the regiment. Through some mysterious manner, perhaps an instinct, the brigade became aware that it was only being used as a decoy, that other troops were edging closer to the fort on either side of these open fields under cover of the woods and behind the railroad embankment to storm the place. Although this brigade kept its line steady and unwavering for two-thirds of the way in the face of the whole fire, it was expecting every moment to see a rush from the cover to finish the work. This parade had kept a magnificent front to within 500 yards of the rebel fortifications within the two right regiments. The 18th Massachusetts and the 118th Pennsylvania received the order right face double quick march, and they were soon under the cover of the railroad embankment of the Orange and Alexandria. Simultaneously, the two left regiments were ordered to face the left and file into the woods, and the part of the drama that had been assigned to this brigade was taken from the stage. The loss to the 18th during the half hour was exposed to this target practice. The rebel gunners was 2 killed and 10 wounded. Among the wounded was Lieutenant Weston of Company I, from the effects of which he soon after died. Just as the shades of the evening began to lower, Russell's division of the Sixth Corps sprang from their cover a little to the right and in advance of the position occupied by the 18th and charged the fort. They carried it handsomely in 10 minutes and captured 2 brigades of rebel troops with 4 pieces of artillery. That was a very colorful explanation of what happened, and also kind of a very sad instance where somebody recognized that they were only being used as a decoy. So these men that were killed, we don't know if Thomas Mann justifies that or not, but these men are killed in an effort to trick Confederates. So this is a whole battle. It seems to be a ruse on all fronts to try and trick Confederates into thinking there are even more Union soldiers than actually are there. That is all I have primary source wise tonight. I have so much more, but those are the ones that really struck me tonight to share with you guys. Again, thank you, Dan Casella, for sending us that wonderful New Jersey account about the bayonet wounds. Because again, we do have this notion that bayonets are not freely used in the war, and I think we just pulled like 4 sources of accounts saying that there are bayonet wounds galore here at this battle. Yeah, that's I hope I've done Rappahannock some justice tonight, because it's one of those obscura battles I talk about, and it's nice to finally have some conversation about it. Darren, what do you make of Rappahannock Station? What is your thoughts about it today? Because both you and I went into this sort of not knowing a whole
I
bunch
find
of.
it extremely interesting,
Yeah,
and I think it's definitely something I'm going to study a lot more. This, not just particularly that engagement, but all of those engagements really. And I was going to say to you, I think that sets us up quite nicely to go away and study a little bit about the Mine Run campaign, doesn't it? And come back on the anniversary for that one.
I'm only smiling because of our comment that
I
John.
know we got Yorktown. He had to mention it, didn't he?
You had to. Well, yeah.
But
So
yeah,
yeah.
in the future, I'd like to discuss the Mine Run campaign. So that's your homework, as along with your Fredericksburg homework. Yeah,
Start getting into Mine Run.
yeah. Why not?
I think that would be a awesome talk.
It's a little continuation of what we're doing here, really.
Yeah, no, and I like that. I think that would be a very worthwhile
So
talk to
end of
dive
end of the
into.
month, I think we should on a Sunday evening delve into that one.
Yeah, that doesn't sound like a bad idea in my mind.
On better news, tomorrow, 8th of November, 2021, the US border will finally open. Merry bloody
Means you're not
Christmas!
far, man. It's coming. You'll be there
Yes.
sooner than later. I know. I can't wait. We're gonna be hitting these battlefields again, and we're gonna
So
be able to bring you guys some
yes,
awesome stuff.
there you go. December, here I come.
All right, Darren. Well,
Okay, cool. I really enjoyed that. Thank you for
yeah. Thank
inviting
you
me
for
on
joining
again.
me, and Dan. Again,
And
thank you for sending us that quote today. That was a really interesting thing to add to this conversation.
thanks to everyone that commented on Facebook. I was following the chat on Facebook.
Yep. And I'll go back and
So
I'll read them and I'll respond
yeah,
accordingly
so
too.
we had quite a few guys on there. Eric Cole was on there, and Derek was on there,
Yeah,
and
and I saw Eric Cole's on
um,
there. So Eric, thank you for watching today, bud. I really appreciate you tuning in and keeping up with
Jesse
Unfiltered.
popped up for a bit, and yeah, we had quite a few, and Tim and even John popped in for a bit.
John Roos?
He did.
Wow, I miss him. He's a
Yeah,
part of the Unfiltered Historian too,
come
man.
on,
He needs to
John.
get on here.
We
I know
need
we
you on
need
these
you on a
videos,
video,
mate.
man. Especially Mine Run and Payne's
Yeah,
Farm.
come on.
It has been forever, and I'm glad he was able to contribute to that. So I'll go back and I'll look at everything you guys had to say. But thank you guys so much for allowing the Unfiltered Historian to be a thing, because I see how much these videos evolve as we do them, and as you guys continue to engage and keep up with us. It's just you're making dreams come true, guys. Seriously, and I'm so glad we were able to just have this community and have friends like everyone here. So without too much of sappiness tonight, thank you guys again so much for allowing us to have this platform, and we'll continue to bring you guys everything we possibly can. Cheers and have a great week. See you all
Thanks
Tuesday
very much.
night.